Strange encounters with mysterious beasts in Alaska. The vast and untamed wilderness of Alaska is a place of breathtaking natural beauty, a land of towering mountains, sprawling tundras, and dense forests. Sparsely populated and largely untouched, this frigid expanse is home to more than just its rugged landscapes and wildlife. According to numerous reports, it also harbors creatures of a more mysterious nature. While the legend of Bigfoot's presence in Alaska is well known, other bizarre entities have been spotted lurking in its remote reaches. This is a collection of some of the most perplexing Alaskan cryptid encounters. One particularly eerie category of sightings involves strange entities resembling what can only be described as dogmen. These creatures have been reported in the far northern wilderness, including an encounter shared by a witness named Melissa H. on the Dogman Encounters website. She recounts a chilling experience in Matanuska Valley County, Alaska, while driving home from work in the early morning hours. Her route took her through the isolated northern stretch of Trunk Road, between Palmer and Wasilla, nearly 100 miles of icy, desolate wilderness, where one could drive all night without seeing another vehicle. It was around 2 a.m. on a cold October night in 1998, and Melissa was cautiously navigating the icy roads. About 10 minutes from home, her headlights illuminated a massive, dark figure ahead. Initially mistaking it for a moose, she slowed down, only to realize it was standing on two legs. Too slim to be a bear, it had spikes running down its neck and back. She describes the moment in chilling detail. I could clearly see its wolfish muzzle, large upright ears. The spikes on its back were in fact clumps of fur. Its spine curved in a smooth, very natural-looking way. It was standing in the ditch, inches from the pavement. Because I was focused on its upper body, I do not recall anything about its back legs or if it had a tail. I did see its front legs, though, very doggy-looking, hanging awkwardly down and slightly toward its front, exactly as you'd expect if a dog stood upright. While it clearly had a canine look, there was still something off about it that I cannot articulate. It was perfectly still, and at this point, given the proximity to Halloween, I was quite convinced it was some sort of Halloween prop, because it was clearly not any kind of existing animal. I was deeply impressed and gently stepped on the brakes, intending to stop and examine it closely. Then it turned its head towards me. In the tiny fraction of a second that it took for it to swivel its head, I knew I had made a terrible mistake. The fluidness of its movement removed any and all doubt that this was some kind of prop. It was horribly, terrifyingly alive. The pale, off-white glow of its eyeshine in the headlights destroyed any possibility of a human in a costume. I think I sat there gaping at it in shock for a few seconds, the car barely moving by now, but still inching closer. As I was almost upon it, I think it could have leaned forward and touched the car if it had wanted. I had to look up to see its face. Again, I'm a bad judge of such things, but I am 5'4", and it was a hell of a lot taller than me. Tall like a polar bear standing. 7 feet? 8? I really can't say. I snapped out of my trance and slammed on the gas. The car fishtailed and I prepared myself for death by monster, as I was certain I'd end up in the ditch. But the tires caught the pavement and I drove like a complete maniac all the way home. I did not look back. This was no ordinary Bigfoot sighting. What then did Melissa encounter that night on the lonely, frozen road? Could this have been one of the infamous dogmen reported around the world? Was it some kind of werewolf, a supernatural entity, or simply a figment of an overactive imagination? No one knows for sure, but it remains a terrifying tale. Another Alaskan mystery creature, similar to Bigfoot but seemingly unique in its own right, has been reported in the southwest region near Lake Iliamna. Known by various names, the Urayuli, bushman, big man, tent monster, Nantina, or most commonly, the Urayuli, meaning hairy man. This beast is said to resemble the classic Bigfoot, but with distinct differences. Described as standing between 7 and 14 feet tall, the Urayuli is covered in shaggy hair, often appearing more ape-like than human. However, its most striking feature is its disproportionately long arms, which extend down to its ankles. Its eyes are said to glow red in the darkness. Highly adept at swimming, this creature has been blamed for livestock and pet disappearances, campsite raids, and fish thefts. Alleged tracks attributed to the Urayuli have been found near bodies of water, and in 1982, a hunting guide even captured a supposed photograph of one standing on a mountain ridge near Dillingham. Could the Urayuli be a variant of Bigfoot, or is it something entirely different? Alaska is also home to its share of aquatic cryptids. One of the most famous is a mysterious sea creature said to inhabit the waters around Kodiak Island. The first well-documented modern sighting took place in April 1969, when the shrimp boat Mylark detected an unusual sonar reading at a depth of over 300 feet. The crew was shocked to see what appeared to be the outline of an enormous dinosaur-like beast with fins and a long neck resting on the seafloor. Although the creature remained motionless, the sonar image was captured, and skipper Chet Peterson estimated its length to be around 200 feet. The image made front-page news in the Kodiak Daily Mirror. Another sighting occurred in the summer of 1971 when a fishing crew spotted a bizarre 30-foot-long marine animal with a horse-like head. One of the crew members fired a rifle at it, causing the creature to submerge and swim directly beneath their boat before resurfacing on the other side. Eddie Pakinen, one of the crew members, described the encounter. "We don't know what it was, but it had a grayish color and we couldn't see any fins or any tail, and it never made any noise. It would just come up and you could see the head and part of the body." According to witnesses, the creature appeared near shore at around 2 p.m. for several consecutive days, and it was even photographed, with the image later appearing in a Wani magazine. A more recent sighting occurred in 2002, when a fishing skiff in Uganic Bay spotted an unknown creature surfacing in the early morning hours. Despite the dim light, crew member Tolef Monson described what they saw. "There's this neck and head, and it wasn't like your hands around the neck big. It was like your arms around the neck big. I saw it do its movements, but I couldn't tell you if the neck was a foot in diameter or 3 feet in diameter. It was all darkish, but I was paying attention to driving the skiff. It didn't really focus on us. It didn't look at us. It didn't make eye contact. No. And whatever it was, didn't stick around. In a few seconds, it was gone, back under the water. I mean, we were so tired that it was like, did I just see that? Did we just see that?" Monson had another unsettling encounter the following summer, when something rammed into their boat from below on a calm day. The impact was powerful enough to nearly throw him overboard, and he insisted that no whales were present in the area. He remarked, "It was big, like a log, hitting the skiff. But nothing goes dong and lurches this big old skiff like that. I don't know what that was either." Was this the same sea creature or an entirely different beast? Whatever the case, Alaska remains a land of mystery, its vast wilderness and deep waters continuing to hide secrets that defy explanation. Tony Willia's 2-day ordeal in the wilderness, after falling into Lac La Martre. A man who spent 2 days stranded on an island after his canoe capsized claims he had a chilling encounter with a mythical being. In the Tlisho region of the Northwest Territories, he's far from the first to report such an experience. On July 17th, 42-year-old Tony Willia was traveling by boat from Wati to the northernmost tip of Lac La Martre when he noticed something floating in the water. A plastic bag drifting along the waves. Steering his boat closer, he prepared to retrieve it. Just as he reached in, a wave struck, throwing him overboard into the freezing lake. Weighed down by his soaked clothes, he struggled to climb back into the boat, but found himself being pulled downward. Grasping a plastic bag of supplies, he began the long, exhausting swim to shore. "I managed to swim to an island at the end of the point," Willia recounted from his Yellowknife hospital bed last week in an interview with CBC in Tlisho. That's when he encountered something he never expected, the bushman. "All of a sudden, there was a big man standing beside me," he recalled. The figure soon disappeared, vanishing into the trees with the sound of snapping branches marking its departure. Willia quickly gathered his soaked clothes, packed them into a white bag, and prepared to leave the island. After swimming away, he endured another 48 hours alone in the wilderness before being rescued by the RCMP and the Canadian military. Once safe, he eagerly shared his story, telling anyone who would listen about his encounter with the bushman. For many in the Tlisho region, the existence of bushmen, known in the Tlicho language as Nago, is an undeniable reality passed down through generations. These mysterious human-like entities are said to have roamed the land for thousands of years, feared for their ability to abduct people from bush camps. Tlicho columnist John B. Zoe described the terrifying nature of Nago in a 2010 issue of NWT News North. Generally, they are silent, and for the unfortunate few who have seen them, these symptoms can be experienced. The back of the neck will tingle, skin will break into goosebumps, unstoppable shivers. The heart beats faster, accompanied by shortness of breath, Zoe wrote. Tlicho elder Michelle Lewis Rebeska first heard about Nago as a young boy while living in the bush with his parents. "I got the story from my grandma because my grandma lived in the bush all the time," he said. According to Rebeska, Nago and the Tlicho people have coexisted in the same region since time immemorial. These beings resemble humans, even wearing modern clothing, but possess powerful magic. They are said to lure people in and abduct them, never to be seen again. There are even stories of Nago stealing entire moose and caribou carcasses. One of the most chilling accounts Rebeska heard as a child was about a relative who encountered Nago and mysteriously vanished. In that particular tale, Nago appeared suddenly on an island. They used medicine power to push him into the shore. They did it. They took him, Rebeska recalled. So we never seen him, never heard him again. Some people heard him talking, screaming help, but nobody can do nothing. Nearly a century later, Rebeska had his own unsettling encounter with Nago. It happened decades ago as he was driving toward the Frank Channel Bridge between Ray and Edzo early one morning. A man was standing in the middle of the narrow bridge. Rebeska slowed down as he approached, but before he could react, the man suddenly leapt over the side. Alarmed, Rebeska rushed out of his vehicle and ran to the edge, expecting to see the man in the water below. But there was nothing. "I didn't see him. I don't know what happened to him." Rebeska has spent years collecting and passing down stories of Nago to future generations. He believes that as development pushes deeper into the wilderness, encounters with the bushman will only become more frequent. A terrifying encounter on a logging road. A hunter comes face to face with a Sasquatch. A witness and his family were out bear hunting on a remote logging road when they had an encounter that would forever change their perception of the wilderness. At approximately 9:30 p.m., as they drove past a power line cut line, they noticed what appeared to be the rear end of a bear disappearing into the left-hand side of the clearing. Curious, the witness exited the vehicle and walked about 50 yards down the cut line to the spot where the animal had entered the dense brush. As he arrived, something unexpected happened. On the right-hand side of the cut line, opposite to where the creature had entered, several poplar trees, each about 6 to 8 inches in diameter, suddenly began shaking violently. Describing it as an explosion of movement in the brush, the witness was stunned as two enormous hands emerged from the trees, parting the branches. The fingers, he estimated, were nearly the diameter of a Red Bull can and as long as his entire hand. Despite standing on higher ground, the witness found himself face to face with an unknown creature, one he could only describe as a Sasquatch. From his vantage point, he had a clear view of its forehead and nose, though its mouth remained obscured by the thick vegetation. The creature's head was massive, roughly the width of a basketball. Its eyes, the size of golf balls, were deep set beneath a pronounced brow ridge, and had a dark brown hue with no visible whites, except for a faint purplish tinge in the area where the whites would typically be. The forehead was broad with sparse hair, while the nose was flat with nostrils the size of 2 thumbs placed side by side. The hair covering its body appeared matted, and the witness even noticed eyelashes on its eyelids. Startled, the witness instinctively raised his rifle toward the creature. At that moment, it immediately retreated into the dense forest, moving 20 to 40 yards away. Meanwhile, his wife, who remained in the truck with their children, had been flashing the vehicle's headlights, signaling him to return. Although she had not seen the creature in detail, she could make out its hunched silhouette in the brush, estimating that it was crouched approximately 3 feet below its full height. She could also see it shifting and moving throughout the encounter. As the witness made his way back to the truck, something unsettling occurred. Every second step he took, The trees just 15 yards into the tree line beside him shook in response, as if something was following his movements. Upon reaching the vehicle and getting inside, the eerie experience escalated. Almost immediately, the family heard a deep, resonant woo sound echo through the forest, repeating several times. Moments later, a loud bang resounded from the roof of the truck. Alarmed, they sped away, putting distance between themselves and the encounter. Once they felt safe enough to stop, they checked the roof to see what had hit the vehicle. There, they discovered a large clump of mud and grass, about the size of a dinner plate, apparently torn from the ground and lobbed onto the truck. That night, they decided to leave the area. The following day, the witness returned alone to the site of the encounter, hoping to find evidence of what he had witnessed. Upon arrival, he discovered what he believed to be a possible handprint in the mud on the cut line. Though it lacked distinct detail, the impression was notably large, elongated, and wide-set. Further exploration revealed additional anomalies. Several trees had been stripped of their branches up to a height of approximately 7 feet, with the bark peeled downward toward the ground. The sap oozing from the damaged trees appeared fresh. The surrounding area showed clear signs of disturbance. Broken branches littered the ground, and patches of earth had been upturned. As an experienced hunter and outdoorsman, the witness had spent countless hours in the wilderness, yet he had never encountered anything remotely like this before. Until that night, he had never believed in Sasquatch. Now, after coming face to face with what he could only describe as one, his perspective had changed forever. Though shaken by the encounter, he hopes that one day he might see another Sasquatch, this time in even greater detail. A mysterious encounter near cagl. One spring afternoon, a family was out egg hunting near their village of cagl when they came across something incredible. A large, dark, hairy creature walking upright, heading straight toward them. It was May 29, 2012, around 3 p.m. The weather was beautiful, slightly cloudy, and school had just let out for the summer. The family, a mother and her 2 teenage sons, were riding their four-wheeler on the outskirts of the village when they saw it. Could it have been the legendary Bigfoot? "We saw it near the lagoon here in cagl," one of the eyewitnesses said. "It was southeast of Fox Lake." That day, other people were also returning home from egg hunting, so at first, the family assumed the figure was just another person. But after it passed, they looked at each other in shock. "We just saw Bigfoot," one of them said. The creature was incredibly tall and dark, with long arms that hung past its knees. It was about 75 yards away. The family watched for about 2 minutes as it walked toward them. Then, as soon as it noticed them, it turned and disappeared over a hill. They quickly drove to where they last saw it, but it was gone. No one else seemed to have seen the mysterious figure. The mother of the 2 boys later wrote down her experience. "I wanted to go egg hunting but didn't want to go alone, so I asked my sons to come with me. My oldest son knew of a good spot, so we headed toward the lagoon, where the land is flat to the east. When we got there, my older son got off the four-wheeler and ran ahead to check if anyone else was around. He went to the edge of the hill, then ran back, saying somebody was already there. We were about to leave when that somebody suddenly started running, at an unbelievable speed. No human could have covered that much ground so fast. The figure was completely black from head to toe, hunchbacked, with no visible neck, and its head was cone-shaped. Its arms hung past its knees, and it was incredibly tall. At first, we kept asking each other, 'Who is that?' But after watching it move, we knew something wasn't right. It walked fast, taking huge strides, and it would glance at us now and then. No person could move that quickly across the tundra. I finally asked, 'What is that?' We were awestruck, completely dumbfounded. As it reached the edge of our view, I finally said, 'I think we just saw Bigfoot.' In just about a minute, it had crossed the entire hill. It didn't look like it was running, just walking with massive steps. We rushed to the top of the hill, but it had vanished. We drove home, feeling excited and amazed. That's my story. It looked exactly like the Bigfoot in the Patterson film, if you've ever seen it. Bigfoot, or the hairy man, as some call it, is not unheard of in the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta. Just last summer, there were reports of multiple sightings in the Johnson River area and other nearby locations. Could this have been the same mysterious creature? The legends of the kushtaka. The young Tlingit girl I was caring for clutched my arm, shaking with fear. Her dark eyes were wide, her voice barely above a whisper. "Don't leave my side or they'll take me." "Who?" I asked. "The kushtaka," she whispered, afraid to say the name too loudly, as if speaking it might summon them. That night, she was too scared to sleep. We had just been told that the house we were staying in was built on what was rumored to be a native graveyard. The weight of that knowledge hung over us in the quiet darkness. To comfort her, I let her stay in my bed and talked about anything and everything, small, meaningless things, until the first light of dawn shimmered through the window. Only then did she finally drift off to sleep. My sister Megan once told me that for years she believed the kushtaka, often pronounced kushtaka, were frighteningly real. That fear came from our oldest brother, Jamie, who loved telling terrifying stories by kerosene lamplight. He spoke of the horrors the kushtaka were capable of, how they lurked just outside the safety of our home, hidden in the vast, silent wilderness that surrounded us. Outside our windows, the night stretched endlessly. That darkness, combined with Jamie's chilling tales, was enough to make my two little brothers refuse to go outside alone after sunset. Even on quick trips to haul wood, they needed someone with them. Now an adult, my brother Robin recently shared a memory with me, one that still haunted him. Years ago, on a hunting trip deep in the wilderness, our Uncle Rory told late-night kushtaka stories around the fire. The setting was perfect: uninhabited islands, a thick, endless forest, and nothing but the sounds of nature surrounding them. The next morning, Robin and my youngest brother, Chris, were hunting along the beach when they stumbled upon something strange. It was a dead animal, Robin said. Very hairy, grayish. We couldn't tell what it was, but it sure as shit scared the hell out of us. The kushtaka are not just ancient myths. These half-human, half-otter creatures have been spoken of for generations in native Alaskan folklore. In modern times, they've been compared to Bigfoot, extraterrestrials, and other supernatural beings. They appear in horror novels, blog posts, YouTube videos, newspaper articles, and even conspiracy theories. One book describes them as a shape-shifting beast capable of taking your darkest fears and manifesting them into a hellish reality. The book goes further, suggesting that the kushtaka may be connected to fallen angels and the Nephilim, claiming this is information that the UFO community and the church don't want you to know. A horror novel about the creatures paints an eerie picture. Mark wakes up in his Alaskan cabin, alone. His greatest fears are realized when he is tormented by the malevolent kushtaka, the most ancient and evil demon of Alaskan folklore. The battle is not for his life, but for his very soul. One Amazon reviewer, someone who had lived in southeast Alaska and fished for a living, left a chilling comment. Fishermen are a superstitious group, and stories of encounters with this spirit are abundant. They aren't just legends. They are recent. They are believable. I had my own experience in the forest, and let's just say, I'm a believer. Stories of the kushtaka are shared with anyone venturing into the deep Alaskan wilderness, and I too have experienced firsthand the eerie consequences of this tradition. There's something out there. I was exhausted. Working as a cook, deckhand, and housekeeper on a guide boat meant long days. I was up at 6:30 a.m. making breakfast and bagged lunches, and I rarely got to bed before midnight, sometimes not until 2:30 a.m. When the guides and clients went out for the day, I took the chance to nap in the wheelhouse. But today, 2 clients had stayed behind, and now they were waking me up. They tried to act casual, but their voices betrayed their unease. "Something? Can you describe it?" I asked. They hesitated. Finally, the older man spoke. "Something strange. Awful." His tone was no longer casual. "Come outside. You can hear it." I sighed. I had been through this before. Not long ago, 2 non-Alaskan guides had shaken me awake in the middle of the night, panicked. Something had bumped into the hull of the boat. They darted from one side to the other, peering into the still black water. They begged me to turn on the big mast light. I did. They whispered about monsters, about the kushtaka, about the things that lurked in the wilderness. They asked me what I thought. I could have shared the terrifying stories from my childhood, but I was too tired. A log, I said, and went back to bed. I fell asleep to the sound of their nervous whispers and footsteps pacing above me. Now, it was the clients who were spooked. I sighed, got up, and followed them outside. The evening was peaceful. The sky glowed with the soft colors of sunset, reflecting off the still waters of the bay. The endless forest surrounding us was turning black, the towering trees like jagged spears against the fading light. We felt alone, completely cut off from the rest of the world. The clients stood close. "Just listen," one of them whispered. "They're out there." I listened. Then from across the water, a horrible sound shattered the silence. A guttural, echoing cry, something between a deep, mournful howl and an angry, inhuman roar. It had a strange, unnatural aftersound, like a Harley-Davidson being revved inside a long tunnel. The clients gasped. "There it is," they exclaimed. "You heard it, didn't you? We told you something was out there." They were right. Something was out there. "It's a sea lion," I said, and went back to bed. Still, the question lingers. Is there really something out there in the Alaskan wilderness? Do the kushtaka exist beyond legend? Beyond oral tradition, horror stories, and conspiracy theories? What started the tales of these half-human, half-otter creatures? What caused them to be passed down through generations, terrifying children and adults alike? And most chilling of all, could we ever find out the truth? In the land of missing persons, 2 families, 2 bodies, and a wilderness of secrets. In the spring of 2014, firefighters battling a massive blaze on Alaska's Kenai Peninsula made a shocking discovery. They first spotted a lone boot in the dirt, then scattered bones. At first, they assumed it was just another moose or bear, common sights in these remote woods. But then they found a human skull, lying on its side, its blackened molars still clinging to the upper jaw. Alaska State Troopers arrived by helicopter to collect what remained. The bones were so fragile they were nearly reduced to ash. The area, stretching 60 yards wide, was likely disturbed by scavengers. Among the scattered debris, they found hunting knives, coins, metal buttons, a zipper, and a burnt Samsung phone. Everything was charred, much like the rest of the land, ravaged by the Funny River fire, which had consumed nearly 200,000 acres. No one knew it then, but these bones would unravel a strange, heartbreaking mystery, one that spanned a decade and 2 missing men. Troopers guessed the remains belonged to a man, based on the boot size and general experience, but they couldn't determine how he died. Maybe he got lost and froze to death. Maybe he fell down a steep embankment. Maybe he met a bear. There are thousands in the area, some of the biggest in the world. Or perhaps he ate poison berries, intentionally or not. Alaska is a place where people sometimes disappear by choice. The possibilities were endless. Word of the discovery spread quickly to the small towns along the Sterling Highway. In Soldotna, about 20 miles away, Dolly Hills received a call from her granddaughter, who was frantic. Why hadn't the police told them? The same question was on many minds, including that of Lieutenant Kat Shuey, who wondered aloud at headquarters. Could it be Rick? Dolly's son, Richard Thomas Hills, had been missing for nearly 10 years. I first met Dolly in January 2005 while working on a story about the countless people who vanish in Alaska. Over 3,000 had been reported missing the previous year alone, more than the population of Soldotna itself. Curious about Rick's case, I traveled south to the Kenai Peninsula. From above, Alaska is a land of extremes. Glacier-topped mountains, vast forests, and marshy lowlands stretching endlessly into the horizon. It's easy to see why people come here to escape. Some never return. In Soldotna, I met Dolly and Heidi Mateer, Rick's longtime partner and the mother of his children. Dolly was warm and outgoing, with a high, cheerful voice, even when discussing tragedy. Heidi was quieter, steadier. Together, they had spent years searching for Rick. Rick had disappeared on February 24, 2004. He had just returned home from an oil rig job and was heading to Anchorage to pick up a paycheck. He made it there, but 2 days later, his red Dodge truck was found in a snowbank just 15 miles from home. The keys were in the ignition, his wallet and $292 in cash sitting on the front seat. His tracks led away from the truck, one foot dragged, as if he were injured. They led to a house. Maybe he was looking for help. Then onto an abandoned airstrip. And there, the tracks vanished, as if he had been lifted straight into the air. Dolly and Heidi never believed Rick had taken his own life. He loved his kids too much. He had even secretly bought and wrapped Christmas presents for them just months before he disappeared. On the day he left, he asked if they wanted to come along. A man planning to end his life wouldn't do that. They feared something else had happened. Rick had a wild side. He ran with a rough crowd, partied hard, and had tried countless times to straighten out. But no matter what, he always called home. He would never just vanish. After the police stopped searching, Dolly and Heidi kept going. They put up missing person posters, questioned people, and even consulted psychics. One psychic told them that Rick had died alone in the snow, that two men had been nearby but didn't help him. She also said it would be 10 years before he was found. 10 years? We can't wait that long, Dolly had said. But she had no choice. A decade passed. Then, in September 2014, I got an email. It was Dolly and Heidi. "You're not going to believe this," Dolly said. "I hope you're sitting down." "We found him," Heidi added. "But the bones in the Funny River fire weren't Rick's. They belonged to someone else. Another missing man. Another Richard." Richard Bennett had disappeared from the same area in 2005, just a year after Rick Hills. Like Rick, he was an outdoorsman, a quiet man who preferred the wilderness. He lived alone in a trailer just half a mile from where Rick's truck had been found. One day, his family stopped by and discovered his place cleaned out. His belongings packed into labeled bins. His truck signed over to his sister. It was as if he had planned to leave. Months later, his skeleton, minus a skull, was found 300 yards from his trailer. The police assumed it was him. No DNA test was done. His family held a funeral, buried the remains, and moved on. But in 2014, when the Funny River bones were tested, the truth unraveled. The remains buried in 2006 weren't Richard Bennett's. They were Rick Hill's. For 10 years, Rick had been lying in a grave meant for another man. The mistake was devastating. Troopers scrambled to correct it, delivering apology letters to both families. But the damage was done. Leon Bennett, Richard's father, was heartbroken all over again. He had thought his son was at rest. Now, he was missing all over again. He never told his wife, who was in failing health. She died still believing their son had been buried. Dolly and Heidi retrieved Rick's remains from the grave where he had been mistakenly placed. They held hands, said a prayer, and brought him home. Heidi placed the urn beside her bed that night. "I never thought you'd be in my bedroom again," she whispered. The mystery of Richard Bennett remains. He vanished into the vastness of Alaska, like so many others. Maybe he perished in the wilderness. Maybe he left to start a new life. His father still wonders. "You don't want to dwell on it," Leon said. "But there's a possibility." Alaska is full of stories like this. People vanish. Some are found. Some are never seen again. But the families left behind never stop searching, never stop wondering, and never stop hoping. The Hairy Man, Alaska Sasquatch. Donald enjoys watching the Discovery Channel, especially shows about mysteries or strange wildlife. Whenever he does, he sometimes feels the urge to call his brother-in-law, Frank. When they talk, Donald says, Frank gets quiet and serious. That's when they remember. They remember a night more than 25 years ago. They remember the creature that towered 4 feet above their teenage frames in the moonlight. It had long arms, a thick coat of hair, and a face that was both human and not. They remember its strength. "I remember watching him run through the alders in the moonlight," Donald recalls. "We have a lot of alders here. He was pushing them aside while running." Donald and Frank saw what the village elders call olak, the creature many Alaskans know as the Hairy Man. It's a large, powerful, and mysterious biped with near-human features and a reputation for lurking in the wilderness. These stories go back hundreds of years, says Danny Sabert, a pilot who grew up in Chignik. "My grandparents heard them from their grandparents. And when you go to Canada, you hear the same stories." In Canada and much of the United States, hairy man is known as Sasquatch or Bigfoot. In the Himalayas, it's the Yeti or abominable snowman. Mongolia and China have the Alma. The legend is so widespread that an entire field of study, cryptozoology, exists to investigate creatures like hairy man. A quick search for Sasquatch on Amazon.com brings up over 1,000 books. Every region of Alaska has its own version of the hairy man story. The Dena'ina Athabascans call him Nantina and warn that he kidnaps children and raises them in the wild. There's a tale of a man who shot and wounded a hairy man, only for it to escape, leaving behind blood that looked like transmission fluid. A 1981 school publication from English Bay includes a student's account of a summer in Port Graham, where a shadowy figure whistled, hid behind trees, and left her terrified. While skeptics may dismiss these stories, believers remain certain. Donald speaks carefully but with confidence. He knows what he saw that night. Children see the hairy man. In the July 31, 2013 issue of the Delta Discovery, we published a story about a hairy man sighting that took place in April of this year in the village of Napakiak. This week's story revisits the same hairy man encounter, but from the perspective of two children who witnessed the creature. It was late April 2013 when two brothers, ages 16 and 12, were outside in their village of Napakiak. They could see the bluff on the other side of the slough, and it was there that they spotted the creature. It was very large, approximately 9 feet tall and black in color, said the 16-year-old. It was taller than a human and very black, just standing in the open, he added. The older boy waved his arms to get its attention. He even tried whistling, but the creature simply stood there, looking at them. The younger boy, feeling scared, told his brother how he felt. His older brother reassured him, telling him not to be afraid. "This is the first time I experienced seeing Bigfoot," said the 12-year-old. On this late April day, there was still some snow on the ground, and children were playing and sledding down the bluff. Some of the kids spotted the creature, and terrified, ran home crying. They later described the animal saying, its hair was dark brown. The 16-year-old boy heard about the other children who had fled in fear. Eventually, the creature ambled away over the hill in a northwesterly direction until it disappeared from view, just as reported in the previous article. A person who later visited the area took photographs of the footprints left behind. Though the tracks had been distorted after a couple of days by the hot spring sun, it was evident that the footprints were far too large to belong to a human. Around the same time, a worker at the Napakiak Village Corporation was looking out of a second-story window during the early afternoon hours when she saw something unusual walking on top of the bluff across the Napakiak Slough. It was dark-colored and walking on 2 feet, she said. It was really unusual, too tall to be a person. It was taller than the brush on top of the bluff. She had seen people on the bluff before, but they had never appeared that tall. The creature then walked down to the lower part of the bluff and disappeared. About 10 minutes later, it reappeared. Alarmed, the worker ran downstairs and called to people inside the store on the lower floor of the building, urging them to come upstairs and see what she was witnessing. About 8 people gathered at the windows and saw it for themselves. They were all excited. As the group continued watching, a snowmobiler appeared over the hill on the Napakiak Bethel Trail. The driver, seemingly unaware, did not notice the creature, but the creature reacted in an unusual way. It crouched low to the ground to hide from the snowmobiler and only moved again once the snow machine had passed. Moments later, the people in the Village Corporation building watched as the creature ambled away, disappearing over the hill in a northwesterly direction. The worker who shared this account said this was not the only time hairy man beings had been sighted near Napakiak. The day before this incident, a lone ice fisherman near the village had reported seeing a group of them together. A person who later returned to the area took photographs of the footprints left behind. Though the tracks had been distorted by the spring sun, it was clear that they were too large to belong to a human. The worker recalled that her mother and father had always told her, these hairy man beings have their own families and are simply trying to survive, just as humans do. They emphasized the importance of respecting them, just as people respect the land. She also warned that these beings will defend themselves and their families if they feel threatened. We have to leave them be when we see them, she said.